A judge has rebuked the Assemblies of God's Church for failing to turn over records in a sex abuse case. The Pentecostal denomination hasn't complied with discovery orders in a lawsuit accusing it of failing to protect students from a sex offender. Tyrone Bowman live. Let's talk about this story. According to NBC News, a Texas judge is cracking down on the Assemblies of God for repeatedly failing to turn over documents as part of a lawsuit accusing the Pentecostal denomination of mishandling sex abuse allegations. At a hearing last month, District Court Judge Lauren Reeder, based in Houston, said the denomination's national office had been flagrant in its failure to comply the orders to produce records related to alleged abuses by Daniel Zavala, a convicted sex offender and former missionary. Pastors in the Assemblies of God's college ministry, Chi Alpha, hailed Zavala for years as the holiest man alive and sent hundreds of teens and young adults to his home for spiritual guidance, including after he was convicted of child sex abuse. Reeder told lawyers representing the Assemblies of God on August 11 she would order the denomination to pay some of the legal fees of two former Chi Alpha members who sued over alleged abuses by Zavala. Reeder also threatened additional sanctions, including holding the church in civil or criminal contempt of court if it failed to comply with her orders to produce reports, investigations, personal files, and other documents. You don't get to just decide when to start engaging in the discovery process, Reeder told lawyers representing the church, according to a transcript. Assemblies of God officials declined to comment on pending litigation. John Sullivan, a Texas lawyer representing the denomination, acknowledged, while under oath and being questioned in court, that his client had not fully complied with the court's orders to produce documents according to the court transcript. Sullivan testified that his client had been hoping to avoid the expense of going through the court's incredibly broad request for production. What are you talking about, sir? You represent the largest white Pentecostal denomination in the world. You better get your clients to understand that this is serious. And get your client and the Advocate General, the AG, of the Assemblies of God to comply with the court's order. What are you all hiding? Why are you not complying with a judicial decree? The judge's rebuke comes as the Assemblies of God, which has nearly 3 million members across 13,000 churches in the United States, faces criticism from abuse survivors and whistleblowers over its refusal to release internal investigations into the church's handling of sex abuse allegations against Zavala. These advocates have called on the Assemblies of God to commission an independent review of its handling of sex abuse allegations nationwide to ensure vulnerable church members are protected in the future. Well, here's a picture of Daniel Zavala after his arrest in 2023. So this is the person in question right here. Let me get back to this article here. In signed statements, lawsuits, and criminal filings, at least 10 men and boys have accused Zavala of sexually abusing them, many at his Houston home and in his backyard sauna. An ABC News investigation revealed last month that senior Assemblies of God officials were warned repeatedly about the danger Zavala posed, but failed to cut off his influence, allowing more teens and young men to be abused. Two of Zavala's accusers, identified in court documents as Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2, sued the Assemblies of God last year in Houston, alleging that church leaders were negligent in allowing Zavala to work with students. In November, Reeder ordered the Assemblies of God to produce documents related to allegations of Zavala's misconduct. but nearly 10 months later, the denomination has failed to do so, court records show. So, what is wrong with the leaders at the Assemblies of God? If you're supposed to be a godly organization that espouses holiness above all, then you need to act holy and comply with the judge's judicial decree. Angeli Nigam, the lawyer for John Doe's 1 and 2, said the Assemblies of God's failure to produce documents fits a pattern of denomination leaders stating publicly that they are doing all they can to help Savala's alleged victims while withholding information from their clients in court. They say to the public they're letting the facts shine. Nigam said in an interview with NBC News, in the lawsuit, what they're doing is keeping it in the dark by not producing documents and information the court has ordered them to produce. Dozens of boys and young men have described how Zavala, who is 69, used scripture to convince them to strip naked in his sauna. Visiting his Houston home became a rite of passage for generations of Chi Alpha students in Texas. Even after he pleaded guilty in 2012 to sexually abusing 2 boys in Alaska in the 1990s. Over the decade that followed, state and national Assemblies of God leaders were warned repeatedly about Zavala's presence at Chi Alpha events, according to interviews and emails obtained by NBC News. But Chi Alpha pastors continued to bring students to him for spiritual guidance. The former Chi Alpha student identified in the lawsuit as Jane Doe 2 was one of them. He says Assemblies of God pastors sent him and other students on mission trips to Zavala's house to do home repairs for the man they call Papa Daniel. Zavala sexually abused him for 2 years, started in 2013, according to the lawsuit. John Doe, number 1, a blind student who joined Chi Alpha hoping to find purpose and friendship, says Zavala groomed and sexually abused him from 2017 to 2022. This included coercing the students to have, I'll just put it this way, have things that are ungodly with Zavala, according to the lawsuit. Zavala's alleged abuses became public in 2023 after Zavala spoke out on an online forum created by whistleblowers. He was charged with sexually abusing 4 boys since 2005, all of whom he met through pastors connected to Chi Alpha. Zavala has yet to enter a plea on the charges, and he and his lawyers didn't respond to requests for comments. Assemblies of God officials addressed the controversy in their biennial meeting last month, pledging to take steps to prevent anything like it from happening again. We're committed to identifying within our system, within our structures, what's broken and what can be fixed to prevent these kinds of things, said Doug Clay, the denomination's general superintendent. Let me continue to read the article. Donna Barrett, the denomination's general secretary, defended the denomination's refusal to release the findings of an internal investigation by a law firm because she said doing so would violate the privacy of victims and deter others from coming forward. This is hogwash. You folk are lying, and you're covering up because you don't want to comply to the court's order and do exactly what they ask you to do. Nigel said Barrett's comments, which were reported by NBC News, were the first she'd heard about an internal investigation by the Assemblies of God's national office. I do not have that document, Nigel said. Those documents should have been provided in this litigation, and they have not. Reader, the judge is expected to decide at a future hearing how the Assemblies of God will be ordered to pay in legal fees and whether she will impose any additional sanctions. In legal briefs filed last month, Nigel asked the judge to award $57,000 in legal fees and requested that she further punish the Assemblies of God by instructing jurors at trial that they can infer from the denomination's failure to produce documents that the church knew Zavala was a sex predator and did nothing to stop or warn children and young men from being sent to him. The Assemblies of God has said it took appropriate actions once it received reports of sexual abuse by Zavala. All right, AOG, Assemblies of God. What is it with you people that you just can't do what the judge asks you to do? You're scapegoating, you're hiding, you're lying, you're being deceitful, and you're protecting this man. The Assemblies of God has said it took appropriate actions once it received reports of sexual abuse by Zavala. No, the appropriate action should have been to have him arrested. What do you mean appropriate actions? There's only one appropriate action. He should have been arrested and charged. You know how many innocent people are languishing in prison for false accusations of things like this? Their lives have been destroyed. Their jobs have been taken away. Their reputation and character assassinated. And here you have an actual predator that you all have been protecting and still protecting because you don't want the Assemblies of God to look bad? Are you serious? This is why people don't go to churches now. This is why they're leaving by the hundreds of thousands and by the millions and will never come back because of crap like this. If people are offended, then just be offended. It's called life. What about the real victims whose lives have been destroyed because of men like him? At the next scheduled hearing on September 29, Judge Reader will consider whether to impose sanctions against the Assemblies of God District Council that oversees the church's affairs in South Texas. Impose the sanctions, Your Honor. Don't pussyfoot around with this. Don't play with this. Impose the sanctions, hold them in contempt of court, and deal with them. Don't play with this. You are a sitting judge. Be on the side of the victims. Do not side with the Assemblies of God because they are wrong. So all this takes place in South Texas, which also has failed to comply with orders to produce documents related to Zavala court records show. Lawyers representing the Assemblies of God South Texas District Council didn't respond to a request for a comment. I guess not, because you can't. You can't justify this type of lascivious behavior. You can't justify this type of nefarious behavior. Never surrender. Never quit. Hi, Barbara Lane. All right, I got to get ready to go.